Welcome to Teach Us to Pray. My name is Jeff Hoffmeyer. T.S. Eliot in The Four Quartets says, "Humility is endless." True. Prayer is also endless, not least because it's the primary place for the cultivation of humility as we express both our reliance on God and our gratitude for God's many gifts. The endlessness of prayer is also due to the fact that we can never fully plumb its mysteries. God is with us in all of this and leads us in this wholly endless endeavor. God gives us the Bible, which acts like a script for our conversation with God. The Bible is God's answer to that enduring request made in the Gospel of Luke by an unnamed disciple, "Lord, teach us to pray." And welcome to episode 54 of Teach Us to Pray. Welcome back after a mostly unintended break over a big chunk of the summer. Thanks for your patience, and thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing this podcast with others. Producing this podcast is one of my favorite things, and so I jump back into this endless conversation we call prayer with all of you with much joy. In this episode, I'll dig into Psalm 139, a prayer of David. Speaking of prayer as endless, this psalm in and of itself has depths that can never be fully plumbed over a lifetime, let alone in a 12-minute podcast episode. I'll just make a few points about how I think this psalm can lead us in prayer. As always, do not be limited to my thoughts, but be guided on your own by the Spirit through these incredible words. First, just a brief note about the line that is at the beginning of this psalm, the words that come before the verses themselves. We read, "To the choir master, a psalm of David." This is called the superscription. The "to the choir master" part indicates that this psalm was probably set to music and was used in corporate worship. The "of David" part means, of course, that it was written by King David. Some scholars cast doubt on whether or not all of these "of David" psalms were actually written by David, thinking that maybe they were written by others but just associated with David. I don't buy that for what it's worth. These psalms seem to me to have a very common voice and seem to have been authored by one person, that person being the historical king of Israel. I won't read all of this psalm out loud, but we'll read a few different sections, commenting as I go. The psalm begins like this with verses 1 through 6. "O Lord, you have searched me and know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all of my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it." Psalm 139 is a prayer about God's presence and a prayer about God's knowledge of us. The word that dominates these opening lines is the Hebrew word for know, which is yada. Yada is not to be confused with Yoda. God's knowing of us, God's yadaing of us is full. God knows us completely. God knows every thought we have, knows every word we speak, even before we speak it. Is this good news, though? If you knew someone who you knew somehow had this kind of knowledge of you, someone who knew every thought you had, knew all of the words you were going to speak before you spoke them, would you want to be around that person? Would you not flee, desperate to get away from their all-knowing presence? David seems to have this desire to flee from this fully knowing God. Here are verses 7 through 12. "Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the furthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. David is wrestling in prayer with two of God's qualities. God is omniscient, all-knowing, and God is omnipresent, present in all places and all times. Part of what prayer does is it makes theology real. In prayer, we wrestle with who God is, which is different than and more significant than simply bandying about theological truths. What I mean is this: if we simply read Psalm 139, it's maybe just kind of nice that God knows us fully and is always and everywhere present. But if we pray Psalm 139, these truths sink in and have the power to truly transform us. In the case of Psalm 139, this could very well mean wrestling with God's omniscience and omnipresence. We might realize that we actually dislike God's full knowledge and always nearness, or that this strikes fear in us, or that this feels oppressive, or like an invasion of our privacy. The beauty of this wrestling in prayer is twofold. First, this is by design. Israel, the name for God's people, means those who wrestle with God. Second, and relatedly, this wrestling drives us to dwell in the character of God, of who God is. In the case of Psalm 139, in his own wrestling, David comes to dwell on the character of God as creator. This comes out in verses 12 through 16. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God! How vast is the sum of them! I try to count them, they are more than the sand. I come to the end, I am still with you. You see, whether it is awful or wonderful that there exists someone who knows us fully and is always present to us, entirely depends on the character of the knower. In his essence, God is creator, and God knows us as the one who made us. God has creative knowledge of us, the way Beethoven knew the Fifth Symphony, the way Tolkien knew Middle-earth, the way Van Gogh knew Starry Night, the way George Lucas knew Yoda, the way Shakespeare knew Romeo and Juliet, the way Wendell Berry knows Port William. How much more does God have creative knowledge of us? We are fully known and we are fully loved. God created you and me, and God's creative love for each of us brings God also to a costly redemption of each of us. We can trust God's knowledge of us because of God's character, because of who God is as creator and redeemer. So friends, wrestle with God in prayer as led by Psalm 139, and in the wrestling, come to a deeper trust of the one who made you, the one who gave himself for you. Begin right now. Pray with me. God of grace, you know me fully. Every thought, every word, every act. I admit your full knowledge and your always presence are not easy for me. I fear this exposure, and I trust you because of who you are, creator and redeemer. I am fully known and fully loved, and that is enough.
Raise your hands, take a second and breathe in, singing I'm here for a reason. Raise your hands, take a second and breathe in, singing hallelujah, unknown and loved. Raise your hands, take a second and breathe in, singing I'm here for a reason. Raise your hands, take a second and breathe in, singing hallelujah, unknown and loved. Raise your hands, take a second and breathe in, singing I'm here for a reason. Raise your hands, take a second and breathe in, singing hallelujah, unknown and loved. Raise your hands, take a second and breathe in, singing I'm here for a reason. And away you fly.
Teach Us to Pray is a podcast of Denver Institute. For more resources like this one on exploring the endlessness of, Jesus and prayer and grace, visit denverinstitute.org. Please share this podcast with others you know. Until next time, keep wrestling with God in prayer. Keep trusting the one who knows you fully and loves you fully. Keep praying and keep asking, Lord, teach us to pray.